Hi, I'm Ron Sprunberg, co-founder and CEO of Hi Mama. Welcome to our podcast about all things early childhood education.
In this week's episode, we discuss how providing children in your preschool programs with meaningful exposure to pitch can help them to learn the language of music at an early age. Incorporating musical education helps children sing in tune and understand rhythms, as well as reinforce skills like sequencing and patterning. Our guest, Rob Young, is the host and creator of Preschool Prodigies, a fun, colorful, and accessible program for teaching children music. Rob studied music technology at NYU, and after teaching preschool in Delaware, he realized that this early age was the right time in a child's life to start learning about the language of music. If you're interested in learning about the cognitive benefits of meaningful exposure to pitch and practical tips on how to implement musical education in your preschool, then stay tuned for this week's episode of the Preschool Podcast. So, Rob, you're our first guest on the podcast who has expertise in the music and auditory domain. So we're stoked to have you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us today, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. It's really exciting to be here.
So tell us about Preschool Prodigies. What's it all about?
Sure. Well, Preschool Prodigies is a interactive series of video music lessons. We sort of combine video lessons with workbooks and with song sheets to make it nice and easy for people to get a music education. The real sort of trick to Preschool Prodigies is what we call meaningful exposure to pitch. And I've heard you talk on the podcast before about the sort of critical development period for young kids. So we're talking about 0 to 5, basically, and having a nice, consistent, meaningful play with music at that age. So what Preschool Prodigies does really well, and what you can sort of do in your own classroom, even if you don't have Preschool Prodigies, is what we call meaningful exposure to pitch. So this is the idea that instead of just sitting a kid in front of a piano with 88 notes to play, imagine sitting them in front of a color-coded bell or just a tube or anything that plays one note and allowing them to sort of experience that one note in a consistent and meaningful way. So we sing a lot about colors. We sing a lot about the solfege notes like do, re, mi. We sing a lot about letters and numbers, and it's all sort of just different ways of speaking about the same language of music. So it just makes it nice and easy. It sort of plays to kids' strengths and that it's consistent and easy, and you don't need to read music either, which makes it nice for preschool teachers out there and for parents who maybe don't have a music background, but they know that they want to get their kids started playing an instrument.
And why is meaningful exposure to pitch important?
Sure, great question. So if you look at, the children who grow up in Mandarin China or grow up speaking Mandarin Chinese, and then you look at children who grow up speaking English, there's actually a massive gap in what we call the perfect pitch, or the range of perfect pitch. And perfect pitch is the idea that you can hear a note and then say, oh, that's a C, or that's an E flat, or that's an F. And it's also the idea that you can look at a piece of music, and because you sort of have this innate sense for pitch, you can just sing it off the page. So what we're really doing by giving kids meaningful exposure to pitch is sort of filling in this gap that exists. That's based mostly on the fact that English is not a tonal language. So if you look at children who speak Mandarin Chinese, they grow up speaking a language based on pitch, based on tone. So even at the youngest, even at 6 months old or even at 6 days old, their parents are kind of like, speaking to them in a language that's severely or heavily based on pitch rather. So the idea being that they have to learn how to sort of distinguish the pitches, jump from one pitch to the next, and all this sort of translates to developing a sort of innate musical ear that we unfortunately don't get speaking English, because English, even though we go up and we go down and we sort of have inflection, we're not really based in pitch. It's not going to change the meaning of a word if you say it at a higher register or a lower register, if that makes sense.
Totally. And what's the implication for that for a young child? So let's say there's a child who is exposed to pitch in a meaningful way and a child who's not. What's that going to mean for those children going forward?
Right. So it can mean a couple of things. It just, as far as just playing an instrument goes, it's sort of the most obvious place where it jumps out at you. So if you have a young child who has some solid background with pitch, you can play them a couple notes on a piano, and they could probably tell you, oh, that's do mi sol, or that's sol ti re, or anything like that. So they can really communicate about the language of music. Whereas another child might not even actually hear the difference in those notes. A lot of a lot of tests will show that even if you play two notes that are next to each other, the average person or the average English speaking person won't even be able to distinguish that they're different notes. They'll be like, oh, that's just a piano. But really, a child who has that exposure to pitch is going to be able to tell you, oh, that's this the note versus this other note. And it sort of just on a more general scale makes music a lot more enjoyable and makes music a lot more understandable. And then when you actually get to playing an instrument, so you've got your favorite song that you heard on the radio, you can just sit down, pick up a guitar, pick up a piano, and just kind of figure it out because you've got this sort of ability to speak the language as opposed to sort of having to reverse engineer it from looking up a tab or looking up a chord chart and then playing it and then trying to sing that as you play it. So instead of just kind of reverse engineering music, you can sort of just take it from the ground up and actually speak the language in a very fluid and natural kind of way.
Got it. Very cool. And what's the origin story behind Preschool Prodigies? When did you realize that this was an interesting opportunity that you wanted to devote yourself to?
Yeah, that's a great question and a good story. It kind of started in high school and college in the sense that I grew up playing the drums, and my whole family is a family of drummers. We used to have the most epic family Thanksgiving drum circles you probably ever imagined. But the problem with being a drummer and then going to music school is that you don't really have any exposure to pitch. So I spent 12 years or whatever practicing the drums every day all the time. But then when it came time to sing in front of a class or it came time to listen to somebody play a piano piece and write it down, I was totally lost. So in college, I had to do a lot of sort of blitzkrieg sprint style ear training to sort of catch up. And I built a computer program that helped me do that. And then a couple of years later, after I got out of school and everything, I was teaching preschool in Delaware. I was kind of playing gigs at night, doing the musician thing at night, and then teaching by day. And I was like, wait a second, these are the kids who need or who can really respond well to stimulus at that age, to learning an instrument, to memorizing the sound of pitch. This is exactly what I was missing as a kid. This is what I really needed all along to sort of get through all that sort of more difficult ear training stuff and to just be able to speak the language of music on a piano or on any kind of tonal instrument. So I started by using what they call boom whackers. They're pretty popular in classrooms. They're musical tubes. They're a great alternative or a great affordable alternative to the instruments that we tend to use. We tend to use a lot of decibels in our program, but the boom whackers are great because they're a little bit cheaper. They're super durable. They're easy to clean. And sort of the first rendition of Preschool Prodigies is just a bunch of kids in my music classes with their boom whackers, and then I would take just index cards, just colorful index cards, and kind of hold them up or point them out on the board, and the kids would follow along. And eventually I was like, man, it would be way better if I didn't have to point, if I could just have a video or something that did this for me, and then I could help the kids, I could interact, I could lead, I could pause the video and talk to them. So then it was like, how do we make a little slideshow with the colors? So we did that. And then it was like, okay, let's take it up a notch. How do we make it, how do we have a host? How do we get sort of the grand staff or reading sheet music inside of the videos? So we sort of approached it that way. And you've seen things like Guitar Hero or any of those dance games like Dance Dance Revolution or Let's Dance or anything like that where the music sort of scrolls and then hits a certain spot and then you play. So that was sort of the inspiration, the idea was to take that and apply it to really reading music and to giving it to young kids, making it super accessible to young kids, if that makes sense.
Totally. And so is it geared more towards preschool childcare programs or more towards parents or both?
It definitely started out being geared toward parents. The idea was we had a lot of homeschool families, a lot of individuals who wanted to give their kids music lessons. And so that's sort of how it started out, just in the marketing really, and just in the way that we spoke to people. But very quickly we shifted. I mean, I worked in preschools for about 8 years, if not, much longer if you count my pre-professional life. Just, my mom worked in preschool, so I was always kind of shadowing and helping her out. And she ran a holistic learning center in New York. So just a lot of that. The thing with Preschool Prodigies is that it's really easy to implement in the classroom for sort of a whole group, or it's really easy to do one-on-one at home. And the workbooks themselves is sort of the integrated worksheets that go with each of them, definitely more geared toward the preschool classroom. There's a lot of, handwriting exercises, sequencing exercises, patterning practice. So things that you would normally see inside a preschool curriculum. I mean, I know a lot of preschools these days stay away from dittos or worksheets or anything like that, and they focus more on play. But this is definitely sort of based in that daily exercise morning routine, so that a teacher could pop on a video, they could do some hand signs with their morning meeting, and then boom, 5 minutes later, they've had a music lesson for the day, and they can move on to the rest of their class or the rest of their day, but they've also got this really awesome exposure to pitch. And it's different in that it's not we're not like dancing and doing the wheels on the bus and like, shaking our sillies out. We're singing about the notes. We're using hand signs to go with each note. So there's sort of a nice kinesthetic way to memorize the pitches. So it's definitely, and there's also now we have it in so many iterations at this point. We've got lesson plans for teachers in a full group. We've got parent correspondence for a one-on-one setting. So we definitely have a very like choose your own adventure as far as whether it's for parents or teachers. And there's definitely a lot of people on both sides of that spectrum using it.
Interesting. And so you've mentioned things like, okay, there's videos and I can use this in my program, but can you explain to us sort of like, okay, I'm an early childhood educator. This sounds really interesting, Rob. I want to go try Preschool Prodigies. What would that look like for me to go find your product? And then how would you suggest that I use the Preschool Prodigy program in my preschool or early learning program?
Yeah, totally. So the best way to start out is with all of the free content that we have on YouTube.
Okay.
And on our blog also, a lot of it just gets aired sort of simultaneously. We also have a podcast, and you can find pretty much the same free episodes that go up on YouTube, go up on our podcast, go up on our blog. So it's pretty easy to find in that respect. And a lot of the free lessons have to do with the solfege hand signs. So we're singing do, re, mi, and things like that, and we're using these hand signs. So that way, if you don't have an instrument, or if you're not totally sure if you want to invest in an instrument, you can get a good feel for like, oh, my kids really enjoy this, or this makes a lot of sense. It's really easy for my class, and that way you don't have to go in and invest in it right away. And then if you've gotten through some of the free lessons and you're seeing that it's working, you might want to check out the free starter program that we have, which is sort of more geared toward playing an instrument. It's about 4 to 6 videos that are just about like playing the instrument sort of, and we really recommend using this set of bells. So that's sort of the next investment that everybody makes. Is they do the free videos on YouTube with the hand signs, then they invest in a set of colorful desk bells, which are really nice because they're durable and they're colorful, and they're also, by being a bell, they're individual notes, so you can just give a kid 1 or 2 or 3, which sort of helps to limit and guide their play to make it a little bit more error-proof, which is a big part of what makes the bell so nice as opposed to like a piano, because instead of having 88 black and white notes, you have 3 colorful ones and you can't miss them, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then if you've got the bells and you're really loving it, or if you're, kind of cruising along, then we have the Preschool Prodigies Playground. And that's where we have, 75 video music lessons, all the parent correspondence, step-by-step checklists. Like what a digital curriculum looks like, but that's definitely the idea, and that's where it lives. And it's really, really user-friendly. It's really, really colorful. It's a lot of fun, and we're constantly adding stuff to it. So right now it's technically 60 videos in level 1. Then there's about 15 supplemental videos. And right now we're actually gearing up for level 2, which will be geared more toward school-age kids or toward kids in preschool who have at least done the first level, if that makes sense.
Very cool. Yeah, I was poking around your website and looked at some of the videos. Looks like really good quality stuff for sure. Have you gotten any feedback from people saying anything about their experience with Preschool Prodigies program so far?
Yeah, definitely. If you go to preschoolprodigies.com/testimonials, we have a lot of awesome feedback from some of our users up there. Some videos of parents doing it, some pictures of the kids working on the worksheets and playing their bells. I had a phone call a few minutes ago with somebody who was saying how like they love it because it combines actually reading music with solfege, with numbers and with colors, and then the kids love it because it's sort of an instant gratification, Guitar Hero-esque video game feel. So it's definitely people definitely see it as a nice mix between the sort of more fun, colorful, instant gratification world that we live in and a more traditional music curriculum that's focused on reading the treble clef, reading with solfege, and things like that.
Right. So it sounds like the children can get a bit more engaged with it. So it's not just like you're watching a video, for example, and it's also not like you have a musical instrument that you don't know what to do with. It kind of tries to bring both of those together. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's spot on. I mean, I tend to be surprised when I find out that kids are just watching the videos. A lot of times it's like, oh, my kid loves to watch your videos. And I'm like, but what about the hand signs, or what about the instrument that they're supposed to play? So there's definitely kids on both sides of the spectrum, kids who want to be more passive and enjoy the observation side of it. And then there's obviously the kids that have, a ton of energy and they want to play all the bells at once and give me all the bells and why are you only giving me 3 and things like that. So we definitely get a nice, reviews from all sides of the spectrum, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And you're also running a Kickstarter campaign right now. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, totally. So the Kickstarter was specifically so that we could get 2 or 3, depending on how you look at it, big things sort of in motion for Preschool Prodigies. One of those, and the biggest one, is that we're getting our own brand of desk bells manufactured. And that's going to allow us to ship a little bit more freely, allow us to ship with a little bit more confidence, with a lot more speed. So we're sort of moving from the whole, like, we buy bells and then we send them to people, to now we have our own line and we have our own shipping facility, and it's going to drop ship directly from when you order. So between the time of you ordering and them going out the door, it's just a couple minutes or maybe like 3 hours at most. So that was a big part of the Kickstarter, was to pre-fund or pre-order, pre-sell enough bells for us to meet the minimum order quantity from Taiwan. So that was a big piece of it. And thankfully we raised enough to do that. So that's actually already underway and happening right now, which is really, really exciting. Going to have Mr. Rob on the box, which is kind of a bit of a trip. But and then we've also got, we sort of had a bonus in there. We were going to develop a PSP Bells app, just a nice simple app that allows you to just have some colorful bells on your iPad or your Android device. Just that way, if you don't want to deal with the cost of the bells or the shipping, or if you just want a nice simple alternative. And also for a lot of schools that have iPads and have a tech budget, but they don't have an instrument budget.
Right.
Now they can get for $20, they can get 20 versions of the app that have on every iPad, and then all the kids can have an instrument to follow along with. So those are really the 2 big forces behind the Kickstarter. And the sort of third and kind of like byproduct of both of that is just a better international shipping fulfillment, because we do have a lot of international customers, and that's getting, as we grow, that's getting obviously a little bit more complicated with the legality of things. So we just needed a little bit of a boost to get through some of the paperwork and also some of the logistics behind shipping internationally, which thankfully we're working out right now.
Okay, neat. And you actually have quite a bit of experience in early childhood education. As you said, even your mother was involved in preschool programs, and so you had exposure to that from an early age, and now you're devoting your life to helping out preschool children with Preschool Prodigies. What excites you about what's happening in early education right now?
Oh, I definitely appreciate the technology side of things, in the sense that I know that's sort of what you guys have, or if you focus on that on the podcast in the past. And I know that Hi Mama is, bringing the tech love to the sort of more logistical side of preschool. And I just as a sort of a nerd, I guess, like, I definitely love the idea that more schools are going the STEAM route, and they're making sure that technology and like tablets and these big crazy computers are just sort of integrated into the classroom. And I know that that's sort of controversial in the sense that there's a lot of parents out there who want less screen time or more nature-based, and obviously there's merits to all that. I'm not trying to take a fight with anybody, but I do just really love the introduction of technology, and especially with the iPad and everything. It just makes so many more of the basic things, like kind of like I was saying earlier. We used to use flashcards and we used to use like a pointer, but now I have more of like, the kids can use the video and I can go help the kid who's struggling, or I can go get involved with the kid who's, picking his nose and not doing what he's supposed to be doing or whatever. So I definitely, the sort of flipped classroom mentality where we've got, the instruction happening from a piece of technology, and then the sort of interaction and the more like personal one-to-one interaction happening between the teacher and the kid. That's always to me been just really, really exciting. When I used to run preschool classrooms, we used to do all kinds of stuff with the computer tech lab. We'd have kids like walk us to their house on Google so they could show us like their walk home, and kind of just bring technology into the classroom has always been just, and again, sort of just as a child of technology growing up, like right when computers were sort of in the mainstream, I definitely just love geeking out on that kind of stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And our stance as a technology company in early childhood education has always been that balance is the key. And we actually hope that our product, Hi Mama, for example, creates more time for educators to spend with the children instead of less time with the children having screen time. But I do think one of your really great points is just making things more accessible. And your app that you're doing the Kickstarter for, I think, is a perfect example, right, of something where, maybe you can't afford to get the physical bells in your program, or you don't have the budget for that or whatever. You now have an app potentially where all you need is a tablet, and a tablet these days you can even buy for $30 on Cyber Monday, for example.
Right.
And it's something that's an asset that you can have for many years, and you can download apps to access things that otherwise you wouldn't be able to access, which is, I think, phenomenal. So that's a very good point. Well, Rob, thank you so much for using your expertise to devote yourself to a cause that's helping early childhood education. Personally, I think Preschool Prodigies is a fantastic program, and I hope some of our listeners will check it out. Yeah, I really do. I think it's fabulous. I think more exposure to music and the auditory domain is really cool, and also the fact that what you're doing has a lot of science behind it and a lot of research behind it, and that's another trend that I personally am seeing as being very interesting in early childhood education right now. So, Rob, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Appreciate it.
Hey, Ron. Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
What's your name?
Michaela.
Michaela. How are you?
Hi.
You having fun playing?
Yes.
It's a nice day, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. What's your favorite thing to play out here?
Playing monsters.
You like to play monsters? Do you like the swings? Okay. What else you like to do?
Play my Dora bike.
Oh, with your Dora bike? Oh, okay. Do you ride fast?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Well, have fun here. All right.